The dusty wooden platform creaked under her worn boots as Josephine Parker stood with her hands trembling at her sides, watching the crowd of men gather below like vultures circling prey. The August sun beat down mercilessly on Julian, California, in 1878, and sweat trickled down her spine beneath the faded cotton dress that had once been her mother's. Her father sat slumped in a chair beside the general store, his face buried in his hands, unable to watch what his gambling and drinking had brought them to. The auctioneer, a pot-bellied man named Griggs with tobacco-stained teeth, cleared his throat and raised his hands to quiet the murmuring crowd. Josephine felt her stomach twist as she recognized some of the faces staring up at her. There was Dutch Morrison, who ran the saloon and had a reputation for keeping women locked in back rooms. Simon Cade stood near the front, a silver mine owner twice her age who had buried 3 wives already. The Garrett brothers leaned against a post, whispering to each other and laughing in a way that made her skin crawl. "Gentlemen, gentlemen," Griggs called out, his voice carrying across the town square. "We all know why we are here. Thomas Parker owes considerable debts to several establishments in this town. The total comes to near $3,000, and as he cannot pay, the law allows for this arrangement. Miss Josephine Parker, age 21, healthy and able-bodied, will go to the highest bidder to work off her father's obligations." Josephine wanted to scream that this was not legal, that no law should allow a human being to be sold like cattle, but she had already tried arguing with the sheriff. He had simply shrugged and said that desperate times called for desperate measures, and if her father could not pay his debts, something had to be done. The creditors had pushed for this, threatening to hang Thomas Parker if they did not receive compensation. At least this way, the sheriff had said, she would be alive. "We will start the bidding at $500, Griggs announced. "500, Dutch Morrison called out immediately, his eyes raking over Josephine in a way that made her want to disappear. "700, Simon Cade countered, stepping forward. "1,000, one of the Garrett brothers shouted. Josephine closed her eyes, trying to block out the sound of men bartering over her like she was a horse or a piece of land. She thought of her mother, who had died 3 years ago from fever, and wondered what she would say if she could see this moment. Probably that she should have taken Josephine and run when Thomas's drinking first started getting out of hand. "1,500, Dutch Morrison said, his voice taking on an edge of determination. The bidding continued to climb, and Josephine felt tears burning behind her closed eyelids. She refused to let them fall, refused to give these men the satisfaction of seeing her break. She had spent the last week trying to find another way out of this situation, but Julian was a small mining town, and opportunities for a woman alone were essentially non-existent. She had no relatives to turn to, no friends with means to help. 3,000, Simon Cade declared, and the crowd went quiet. That amount would cover her father's entire debt. Griggs waited, looking around at the assembled men. 3,000 going once, going twice. 5,000. The voice came from the back of the crowd, deep and steady, and every head turned to see who had spoken. Josephine opened her eyes and followed their gazes. A tall man in dusty trail clothes pushed through the crowd, his dark hair falling past his collar beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with several days of stubble on his jaw and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. She had never seen him before. "Who the hell are you?" Dutch Morrison demanded. "Name is Wyatt Ellis," the stranger said, coming to stand at the front. He pulled a leather pouch from his coat and tossed it to Griggs, who caught it with surprise. "That is 5,000 in gold. Count it if you want." Griggs opened the pouch with shaking fingers, his eyes going wide at the contents. The crowd pressed closer, trying to see, and Josephine stared at this man named Wyatt Ellis with confusion. Why would anyone pay that much? It was well over twice her father's debt. "This is legitimate," Griggs said, his voice rising with excitement at his commission. 5,000 in gold coin. "Do I hear any other bids?" the crowd murmured, but no one spoke up. That kind of money was a fortune, more than most men in Julian would see in 5 years of hard work. 5,000 going once, going twice, sold to Wyatt Ellis, Griggs announced, slamming his hand down on the platform railing. Josephine felt her knees go weak. She did not know if this was better or worse than being sold to someone she at least knew by reputation. This stranger could be anyone, could want anything. Wyatt Ellis climbed onto the platform with easy grace, his boots thudding on the wood, and suddenly he was standing right in front of her. "Miss Parker," he said quietly, and she was struck by the kindness in his eyes. "Do you have any belongings you need to collect?" She nodded mutely, not trusting her voice. "Then let us get them and get out of this town," he said. He turned to address the crowd. "The debt is paid in full with extra. I do not want to hear about anyone coming after the Parkers for anything else. This is finished." Josephine climbed down from the platform on shaking legs, and Wyatt Ellis stayed close beside her as they walked through the parting crowd. She could feel dozens of eyes on her back, could hear the whispers starting. Her father stumbled to his feet as they approached, his eyes red-rimmed. "Josephine, I am so sorry," Thomas Parker whispered, reaching for her. She stepped back, and the hurt that flashed across his face might have moved her a week ago. Now she felt nothing but a cold emptiness where her love for him used to be. "I need to get my things." Their small house at the edge of town took only 5 minutes to reach. Josephine went inside while Wyatt Ellis waited on the porch, giving her privacy. She packed quickly, shoving her few dresses, her mother's Bible, and a daguerreotype of her parents from happier times into a carpetbag. When she emerged, her father was standing in the yard, wringing his hands. "Where will you go?" Thomas asked. "I do not know," Josephine said truthfully. She looked at Wyatt Ellis. "Where are we going?" "I have a ranch about 30 miles north of here," he said. "Near Santa Usable." "You cannot just take her," Thomas said weakly. "She is my daughter." "You sold her," Wyatt said, and though his voice remained calm, there was steel underneath. "You stood by and let men bid on her like property. You have no say in what happens now." Thomas flinched and said nothing more. Josephine followed Wyatt Ellis to where 2 horses were tied outside the general store. One was a big bay gelding, and the other was a smaller paint mare with kind eyes. "You can ride?" Wyatt asked. "Yes," Josephine said. Her mother had taught her when she was young. He helped her secure her bag to the saddle, then gave her a hand up. His touch was brief and impersonal, and she found herself studying him as he mounted his own horse. Why would a stranger pay $5,000 just to take her away from Julian? What did he want from her? They rode out of town in silence, and Josephine did not look back. The road stretched ahead through rolling hills dotted with oak trees, the late afternoon sun casting everything in gold. She had so many questions, but her throat felt tight, and she could not seem to make herself speak. After an hour, Wyatt pulled up near a small creek. "The horses need water, and I figure we could both use a rest." Josephine dismounted carefully, her legs stiff from tension more than the ride. She watched as Wyatt led both horses to drink, then pulled some jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags. "It is not much, but you should eat something," he said, offering her a share. She took it automatically, then finally found her voice. "Why did you do that?" Wyatt was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. "I rode into Julian this morning looking to buy supplies. First thing I heard was talk about an auction. When I found out what kind of auction, I wanted to bust some heads. So you bought me instead. I could not leave you there. he said simply. What those men wanted, what they would have done to you, I could not stand by and let that happen. But $5,000, Josephine said. That is a fortune. You do not even know me. Money can be earned again, Wyatt said. He met her eyes directly. A person's life and freedom cannot be bought back once it is gone. Josephine felt something crack in her chest, and suddenly tears were streaming down her face. All the fear and humiliation and anger of the past week came pouring out, and she could not stop it. She turned away, embarrassed, but Wyatt did not try to comfort her or tell her to stop. He simply gave her space to cry. When she finally collected herself, wiping at her face with her sleeves, he handed her a canteen without comment. She drank gratefully, the cool water soothing her raw throat. "What happens now?" she asked. "What do you want from me, want from you?" Wyatt looked genuinely confused. "Nothing. You are free, Miss Parker. When we get to the ranch, you can stay as long as you need to figure out what you want to do. If you want to leave, I will give you money and help you get wherever you want to go." "I do not understand," Josephine said. "You paid all that money. The law says I belong to you now." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "That law is wrong. You do not belong to anyone but yourself. I paid to get you out of that situation, not to own you." Josephine stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception or hidden motives. She had spent her whole life learning to read men, watching her father's drinking buddies and the rough miners who came through Julian. Wyatt Ellis met her gaze steadily, and she saw only sincerity. "I do not know what to say," she admitted. "You do not have to say anything," Wyatt said. He stood and went to check the horses' saddles. "We should keep moving if we want to make it to the ranch by nightfall." They rode through the evening, the landscape gradually changing as they moved into more fertile country. Josephine found herself stealing glances at Wyatt as they traveled. He sat his horse with the easy confidence of someone who had spent most of his life in the saddle, and he seemed alert to everything around them without being jumpy. She noticed the Colt revolver on his hip and the rifle in his saddle boot, but he did not seem eager to use them. "How long have you had your ranch?" she asked, feeling brave enough to make conversation. "About 3 years," Wyatt said. "Bought it with money I saved working as a trail boss. It is not much yet, just a small house and some outbuildings, but the land is good for cattle." "Do you have help?" "Other workers. I have a Mexican couple, Carlos and Rosa Martinez, who help run the place. They have a small house on the property. Good people." Darkness was falling when they finally crested a hill and Josephine saw buildings in the valley below. A modest wooden house with a covered porch stood surrounded by a barn, a corral, and 2 smaller structures. Lamplight glowed in the windows of the main house, warm and welcoming. As they rode into the yard, a door opened and a woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 50, with silver streaking her dark hair and a kind face. "Wyatt, we did not expect you back until tomorrow," she called in accented English. "Plans changed, Rosa," Wyatt said, dismounting. He came to help Josephine down, and she was grateful because her legs felt like jelly. "This is Miss Josephine Parker. She will be staying with us. Josephine, this is Rosa Martinez." Rosa's dark eyes took in Josephine's pale face and trembling hands, and understanding dawned. "Come inside, Mija. You look exhausted." Josephine followed Rosa into the house, which was simply furnished but spotlessly clean. The main room held a table, chairs, a stove, and a comfortable-looking settee. Doorways led to what appeared to be 2 bedrooms and a small back room. "Sit, sit," Rosa urged, pulling out a chair. "I will heat some stew." Wyatt brought in Josephine's bag and set it by one of the bedroom doors. "You can have my room. I will sleep in the barn." "That is not necessary," Josephine protested weakly. "It is," Wyatt said. You have been through enough without worrying about your safety under my roof." Rosa ladled stew into a bowl and set it in front of Josephine along with fresh bread. The smell made her stomach growl, and she realized she had barely eaten in days. She ate slowly while Rosa bustled around the kitchen, and Wyatt talked quietly with a man who must be Carlos, who had come in from the barn. When she finished, Josephine felt like she might fall asleep sitting up. Rosa noticed and gently led her to the bedroom, which held a real bed with a quilted coverlet, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a small dresser. "There is water for washing and clean nightclothes in the drawer," Rosa said. "Sleep as long as you need tomorrow. No one will bother you." "Thank you," Josephine whispered. Rosa patted her hand. "Wyatt is a good man. You are safe here." When she was alone, Josephine washed her face and hands, changed into a soft cotton nightgown that must belong to Rosa, and climbed into bed. The mattress was more comfortable than anything she had slept on in years, and the sheets smelled like sunshine and lavender. She expected to lie awake worrying about everything, but exhaustion claimed her almost immediately. She woke to bright sunlight streaming through the curtains and the smell of coffee and bacon. For a moment, she could not remember where she was. Then everything came flooding back. She sat up slowly, half expecting to discover it had all been a strange dream, but she was still in the neat bedroom at Wyatt Ellis's ranch. Someone had left a basin of warm water outside her door, and Josephine washed and dressed in one of her better dresses, a simple blue calico. When she emerged, Rosa was alone in the kitchen. "Good morning," Rosa said warmly. "Sit, I will make you breakfast. The men are out working, but they will be back for the noon meal." Josephine sat at the table accepting a cup of coffee. "Rosa, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What kind of man is Wyatt Ellis?" "Truly." Rosa settled into a chair across from her, her expression thoughtful. "He is the best man I know. When Carlos and I came north from Mexico 5 years ago, we had nothing. People in the towns treated us badly, would not give us work. Wyatt found us camped by a river, hungry and desperate. He offered us jobs, a home, fair wages. He treats us like family." "He seems too good to be true," Josephine said quietly. "He has seen hardship," Rosa said. "His parents died when he was young, and he was raised by an uncle who was cruel. He worked hard jobs, saved every penny, and built this place from nothing. I think because he knows what suffering is, he cannot stand to see others suffer." Josephine absorbed this, sipping her coffee. "He said I am free to leave whenever I want, and he means it," Rosa said. "But I hope you will stay, at least for a while. It would be nice to have another woman around." Over breakfast, Rosa told her about the ranch and how it operated. They had about 100 head of cattle, some chickens, a vegetable garden, and plans to expand. It was hard work, but the land was good and Wyatt was a skilled rancher. When Wyatt and Carlos returned at midday, Josephine had helped Rosa prepare the meal. She felt strange serving food to the man who had bought her freedom, but he thanked her politely and made no assumptions about her role there. After lunch, Wyatt asked if he could speak with her outside. They walked to the corral, where several horses grazed peacefully. "I want to make sure you understand your situation here," Wyatt said, leaning against the fence. "You are not a servant or a worker unless you choose to be. You can help around the ranch if you want, but you do not owe me anything." "I meant what I said about helping you leave if that is what you want." "Where would I go?" Josephine asked. "I have no money, no family except my father, and I never want to see him again." "You could go to San Francisco or Los Angeles," Wyatt suggested. "Both have opportunities for women. You could work in a shop or a hotel. I would give you enough money to get started." Josephine looked at the ranch spread out before them, at the peaceful valley and the solid buildings. "Could I stay here for a while, just until I figure things out?" "As long as you want," Wyatt said. Over the following weeks, Josephine found herself settling into life at the ranch. She helped Rosa with cooking and cleaning, tended the garden, and learned to care for the chickens. The work was hard but satisfying in a way her aimless life in Julian had never been. Rosa taught her to make tortillas and tamales, and they spent long afternoons talking while they worked. Wyatt kept a respectful distance, always polite but never intrusive. Josephine found herself watching him when he worked with the horses or mended fences. He was patient with the animals, firm but never cruel, and she saw the same kindness in how he treated Carlos and Rosa. Sometimes in the evenings he would sit on the porch and play a battered guitar, singing old trail songs in a pleasant baritone. One morning about a month after her arrival, Josephine was in the garden pulling weeds when she heard a horse approaching fast. She looked up to see a rider coming hard toward the ranch. Wyatt emerged from the barn, and the rider pulled up in a cloud of dust. "Ellis, you need to come quick," the man said. She recognized him as one of the neighboring ranchers. "There are rustlers hitting the spreads north of here. They got 30 head from the Simmons place last night." Wyatt's expression hardened. "How many men?" "At least 6, maybe more. We are putting together a group to track them. Could use your help." "Let me saddle up," Wyatt said. Josephine felt a flutter of anxiety as she watched Wyatt prepare to leave. He checked his weapons carefully, loaded saddlebags with supplies, and gave Carlos instructions about the ranch. When he saw Josephine standing near the porch, he walked over. "I will be back as soon as I can," he said. "Should be just a few days. Carlos has a rifle if there is any trouble, but I do not expect anyone to come here." "Be careful," Josephine said, and was surprised by how much she meant it. Something flickered in Wyatt's eyes. "I will." She watched him ride away with the neighbor, and the ranch suddenly felt too quiet. That night she barely slept, listening to every sound outside. Rosa noticed her distraction the next day. "You are worried about him," Rosa said. It was not a question. "I barely know him," Josephine said. "But you care," Rosa said with a knowing smile. "I see how you watch him when you think no one notices." Josephine felt her cheeks heat. "He saved me. Of course I care about his safety." "It is more than gratitude, I think," Rosa said gently. "And he looks at you the same way when you are not watching." "He does not," Josephine protested. "He does," Rosa insisted. "Wyatt is a good man who deserves happiness. And you, Mija, you are coming back to life. When you first arrived, you were like a scared rabbit. Now you smile, you laugh. You are healing." Josephine had not thought about it that way, but Rosa was right. The constant fear that had gripped her in Julian was fading. She felt safe at the ranch in a way she had never felt anywhere else. Wyatt returned 3 days later, tired and dirty but unharmed. The rustlers had been caught and turned over to the law in the nearest large town. Josephine felt relief wash over her when she saw him ride into the yard, and she had to stop herself from running to greet him. That evening after supper, Wyatt asked if she would take a walk with him. They strolled through the gathering dusk, the air cooling after the heat of the day. "I did a lot of thinking while I was gone," Wyatt said, "about what I want from life. This ranch, it is a good start, but it feels empty sometimes. I built it thinking it would be enough, but I realize now that having something means more when you have someone to share it with." Josephine's heart started beating faster. "I know you have been through a terrible experience," Wyatt continued. "And I do not want to take advantage of your situation or make you feel obligated, but I have to be honest with you, Josephine. Over these past weeks, I have come to care for you deeply. You are smart and strong, and despite everything that happened, you still have kindness in you. That takes real courage." "Wyatt," she said softly. "If you do not feel the same, that is fine," he said quickly. "Nothing has to change. But if there is any chance that you might someday, see me as more than just the man who bought your freedom. I would like to court you properly. No pressure, no expectations. Just a chance to see if there might be something between us." Josephine stopped walking and turned to face him. The last light of sunset painted the sky orange and pink behind him, and she thought he looked like something out of a storybook. A good man, a kind man, asking so carefully for permission to care about her. "I already see you as more than that," she admitted. "I've been trying not to because it seemed too complicated. I did not want you to think I was just grateful or that I felt obligated because of what you did." "And is it just gratitude?" Wyatt asked. "No," Josephine said. "It is more. I like who I am when I am around you. I like hearing you sing in the evenings. I like the way you treat everyone with respect. I like that you are strong but gentle." She took a breath. "I think I am falling in love with you, and it terrifies me." Wyatt reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hands in his. "It terrifies me too. I never expected to feel this way, but I cannot stop thinking about you, Josephine. I want to build a life with you if you will have me." "I do not have anything to offer," she said. "No dowry, no family worth claiming." "You have yourself," Wyatt said. "That is everything." He leaned down and kissed her softly, carefully, and Josephine felt warmth spread through her chest. This was nothing like the rough groping she had dodged from drunk men in Julian. This was tender and sweet, and it made her feel cherished. When they returned to the house, Rosa took one look at their joined hands and beaming faces and clapped her hands together with joy. "Finally, Carlos, they have come to their senses." The courtship that followed was the happiest time Josephine had ever known. Wyatt taught her to ride better, and they would take long evening rides through the hills. He showed her the ranch's boundaries and his plans for expansion, asking her opinion and listening seriously to her suggestions. He brought her wildflowers and books from town, remembered how she took her coffee, and made her laugh with stories from his trail driving days. Josephine had never felt so valued. Wyatt made it clear through 1,000 small actions that he saw her as an equal partner, not property or a subordinate. When she mentioned wanting to learn to shoot in case of emergency, he patiently taught her to handle a rifle and a pistol. When she suggested they could sell eggs and vegetables in the nearby town for extra income, he thought it was brilliant and helped her increase the size of the garden. 3 months after that first kiss, as they sat together on the porch watching stars emerge in the darkening sky, Wyatt turned to her with obvious nervousness. "Josephine Parker, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" She did not hesitate. "Yes." They were married a month later by a traveling preacher, with Carlos and Rosa as witnesses. Josephine wore a new dress of pale yellow that Rosa had helped her make, and wildflowers in her hair. It was nothing like the grand wedding she had vaguely imagined as a girl, but it was perfect because it was real and built on genuine love. Their wedding night was tender and patient, Wyatt taking care to make sure she felt safe and cherished. Josephine had feared this part of marriage, given what she had heard from other women about their duties, but with Wyatt, it was nothing like that. He made her feel beautiful and wanted, and she discovered that physical love could be joyful when it came from a place of mutual respect and affection. The first year of their marriage brought challenges and triumphs. A drought threatened the cattle, but Wyatt's careful water management kept losses minimal. Josephine's egg and vegetable business proved more successful than expected, bringing in steady income. They worked side by side to improve the ranch, adding another room to the house and expanding the herd. Josephine found herself thinking less and less about Julian and what had happened there. The woman she had been on that auction platform felt like a stranger now. She was stronger, more confident, with purpose and direction. When nightmares occasionally woke her, Wyatt was there to hold her and remind her that she was safe. One evening about 15 months after their wedding, Josephine realized her monthly courses were late. She told Rosa first, who confirmed her suspicions with the knowing eye of someone who had raised 4 children of her own. "You are with child, Mija," Rosa said, hugging her tightly. Josephine felt a mix of joy and terror. She wanted children with Wyatt, wanted to build a family with him, but pregnancy was dangerous and so many things could go wrong. That night she told Wyatt, watching his face carefully. His eyes went wide, then bright with tears. "Truly?" he asked. "Truly," she confirmed. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing, then immediately set her down carefully as if she might break. "I am going to be a father. We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Josephine asked, though she could see he was. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Wyatt said. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "This is everything. You are everything." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though the early months brought waves of nausea that left Josephine exhausted. Wyatt fussed over her constantly, which she found touching even when it was excessive. He insisted she rest more, took over her heavier chores, and rode to town to buy her anything she craved. As her belly swelled, Josephine sometimes caught herself thinking about her father. She had not heard from Thomas Parker since leaving Julian, and she did not seek news of him. But she wondered if he knew she was happy, if he regretted what he had done. She decided it did not matter. She had built a new life, and he had no place in it. Her labor began on a cool March evening in 1880. Rosa stayed with her while Wyatt paced outside, and Carlos had to physically restrain him from bursting in several times. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Josephine feared she might not survive. But Rosa was experienced and capable, talking her through each contraction, and as dawn broke, a baby's cry filled the room. "A boy," Rosa announced, placing the squalling infant in Josephine's arms. "A healthy, strong boy." Wyatt came in moments later, his face pale with worry until he saw them both alive. Then he was crying openly, kneeling beside the bed and staring at his son with wonder. "He is perfect," Wyatt whispered. "You are amazing, thank you." They named him Thomas, not after her father but after Wyatt's father who had died when Wyatt was young. Josephine had suggested it, wanting to honor the good man Wyatt remembered, not the one who had failed her. Baby Thomas was an easy child, healthy and content. Watching Wyatt with their son filled Josephine with fierce love. He was a natural father, patient and playful, changing diapers without complaint and walking the floor with the baby when he fussed at night. He sang the same trail songs Josephine had heard him sing from the porch, and Thomas would settle immediately at the sound of his father's voice. When Thomas was 6 months old, a stranger rode up to the ranch. Josephine was hanging laundry while the baby napped in a basket nearby, and she tensed as the rider approached. But Wyatt came out of the barn and greeted the man with a handshake. "Josephine, this is Marshal Davidson from San Diego," Wyatt called. "He has news." The marshal tipped his hat to her. "Madam, I wanted to inform you that your father, Thomas Parker, passed away 2 weeks ago. Liver failure, the doctor said. I am sorry for your loss." Josephine felt a complicated swirl of emotions. Grief for the father he might have been, relief that he could never threaten her newfound happiness, sadness for a wasted life. "Did he say anything at the end?" she asked. "He asked the preacher to tell you he was sorry," the marshal said. "Said he knew he did not deserve forgiveness, but he hoped you were happy." After the marshal left, Wyatt held her while she cried, not for who her father had been, but for who he never became. "It is all right to feel sad," Wyatt said. "He was your father, whatever else he was." "I am sad," Josephine said, "but also grateful. If things had been different, if he had not done what he did, I would never have met you. I would never have this life. That is a terrible thing to feel grateful for." "Life is complicated," Wyatt said. "We cannot change the past, but we can decide what we do with the future. And our future is bright, Josephine. Look at what we have built together." He was right. Over the next few years, their ranch prospered. They expanded their herd, built a larger barn, and hired 2 additional hands to help with the work. Josephine's business grew until she was supplying eggs and vegetables to 3 different towns. She discovered she had a head for numbers and took over managing the ranch's finances, which she was better at than Wyatt readily admitted. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic little boy who followed his father everywhere. When he was 3, Josephine became pregnant again. This time she felt more confident, knowing what to expect, and the labor was shorter. Their daughter arrived on a warm August evening, and they named her Rose after Rosa, who wept with joy at the honor. 2 years later, another daughter joined the family, whom they named Grace. The house that had once felt empty now rang with children's laughter, and Josephine sometimes had to pinch herself to believe this was her life. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Wyatt surprised her with a gift. He led her outside where Carlos and the ranch hands had assembled a new sign to hang over the ranch entrance. It read, "Ellis Ranch, established 1875, Wyatt and Josephine Ellis, proprietors." "We built this together," Wyatt said. "Your name belongs on it as much as mine." Josephine kissed him there in front of everyone, not caring who saw. This man who had given her freedom, who had loved her when she felt unlovable, who treated her as a partner in everything, still found ways to show her she was valued. That night, after the children were asleep and they lay together in the darkness, Josephine thought about the terrified woman who had stood on that auction platform 12 years ago. She would never have believed then that such happiness was possible, that she could feel so safe and loved. "What are you thinking about?" Wyatt asked, running his fingers through her hair. "How different my life is from what I expected," Josephine said. "How grateful I am that you rode into Julian that day." "I thank God for it every day," Wyatt said. "You and the children, you are my purpose. Everything good in my life comes from you." "We saved each other," Josephine said. "You gave me freedom, but I gave you a family, a reason to build something lasting." "Partners," Wyatt agreed, pulling her closer. The years continued to unfold with their share of joys and sorrows. They weathered droughts and hard winters, celebrated good years and worked through lean ones. Thomas grew tall and strong, learning ranching from his father and showing a natural talent for working with horses. Rose proved to have her mother's head for business and her father's kind heart. Grace was the family's free spirit, always exploring and asking questions about everything. When Thomas was 15, he asked about his mother's past. Josephine had known this conversation would come eventually, and she told him the truth, with Wyatt beside her. She explained about her father's debts, the auction, and how Wyatt had saved her. Thomas was quiet for a long time after. "So you were not always free?" "Not always," Josephine said. "But your father gave me freedom and we built this life together. That is what matters." "I am proud of you," Thomas said. "Both of you. You took something terrible and made something beautiful from it." On their 20th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Carlos and Rosa were there, gray-haired now but still vital and beloved. The ranch hands attended, along with neighboring families who had become friends over the years. Looking around at all these people, at the ranch that sprawled across the valley, at her grown and growing children, Josephine felt profound gratitude. When the party wound down and they finally had a moment alone, Wyatt took her hand and led her to the spot where he had first kissed her all those years ago. "I have been thinking about that day in Julian," he said. "How close we came to never meeting, How different both our lives would be. We were meant to find each other, Josephine said. I truly believe that. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Wyatt said. The best decision I ever made was bidding in that auction, and the luckiest moment of my life was when you said yes to being my wife. I love you, Josephine said, the words as true and deep as they had ever been. You gave me everything I did not know I needed. They stood together in the twilight, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting. The ranch would continue, passed down to their children and grandchildren. The love they shared would echo through generations. And the woman who had once stood on an auction platform, terrified and alone, had become someone strong and beloved, surrounded by family and secure in the knowledge that she was truly, finally, completely free. Years later, when Josephine was a grandmother watching her children raise families of their own on the ranch, she would sit on the porch with Wyatt and marvel at the journey. They had built not just a successful ranch but a legacy of love and respect. Their children had grown into good people who treated others with kindness and stood up against injustice. Thomas, their eldest, ran the cattle operation with his wife Maria. Rose had married a teacher from town and split her time between running a mercantile and helping with the ranch accounts. Grace had shocked everyone by becoming a teacher herself, riding from ranch to educate children whose families could not reach the town school. All three credited their parents' example of partnership and mutual respect for showing them what love should look like. The ranch house had been expanded twice, with wings added for the growing family. Sunday dinners brought everyone together around a table that groaned with food and echoed with conversation. Josephine would watch Wyatt at the head of the table, silver threading his dark hair now, and feel her heart swell with love just as strong as it had been when they were young. On a warm evening in the spring of 1898, 43 years after that fateful day in Julian, Wyatt and Josephine sat together on the porch as they had done countless times before. They were in their 60s now, their children grown, blessed with 7 grandchildren and their first great-grandchild on the way. You ever regret it? Josephine asked suddenly. The money you spent, the life you could have had if you had never stopped in Julian. Wyatt turned to her with surprise. Regret? Josephine, spending that money was the best investment I ever made. It bought me you and you gave me everything worth having. But $5,000, she said. That was a fortune. And you are worth 10 times that, Wyatt said firmly. He took her weathered hand in his, their fingers interlacing with the ease of long practice. I would do it again tomorrow if I had to. Every day with you has been a gift. Josephine leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. I never thought I could be this happy. That day on the platform, I thought my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning. We saved each other, Wyatt said, echoing words she had spoken years ago. I was alone, building something with no one to share it with. You gave me purpose beyond just survival. You gave me love. As darkness fell, they sat together in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Inside, their granddaughter was practicing piano, the notes drifting out through open windows. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed peacefully. The world they had created hummed with life and contentment. Josephine thought about the long road from that auction platform to this porch, from terror and despair to peace and joy. It had not always been easy. There had been hard times, losses, moments of fear and doubt. But through it all they had faced everything together, two people who had chosen each other and never stopped choosing each other day after day, year after year. I love you, she said softly. And I love you, Wyatt replied, pressing a kiss to her silver hair. Always have, Always will. They sat together as the stars emerged, holding hands and counting their blessings. Two souls who had found each other in the Wild West and built a love story that would outlast them both. The ranch would endure. Their children would carry on, and the legacy of a cowboy who had given everything to set a woman free, and the woman who had given him her heart in return, would echo through all the generations to come. It was a story of freedom and love, of second chances and new beginnings, of two people who had turned a moment of darkness into a lifetime of light. And as they finally rose to go inside for the night, Wyatt helped Josephine to her feet with the same gentle care he had shown that very first day, proving that some loves truly do last forever.